All right, class. Well, this is an interesting class period. We normally meet up here on Sundays in the upstairs coffee house, and we're going into Easter weekend, and here we are. It's the first time in history that our churches have been closed on Easter weekend, and it's awkward for all of us. But had a great lesson. We're really enjoying this study through A Shepherd Looks at Psalm 23 by Philip Keller. It's a simple little book. It's an old book, but it's written by a gentleman who was a shepherd himself. And so he's able to break down Psalm 23 for us from the shepherd's perspective. And we've gone through 4 lessons already, and today's lesson is on He Restores My Soul. And it's such a good lesson, and very appropriate for the time that we're in, as we're all kind of struggling through this coronavirus and social distancing and everything that's involved with that. That, I thought, man, I would just sure love to still share this lesson with my class. So I hope that you're able to apply some of this to your life, that you see, how we can trust God to restore our souls. But for those of you, in case we have any viewers that maybe haven't been in our class, I just want to quickly recap where we've been, okay? And so I'm going to call this 4 lessons in 4 minutes, and I hope I can do it in 4 minutes. But basically, I just wanted to start out, the Lord is my shepherd. Okay, we've heard this forever, and we generally, the first thing we just think about, or the first interpretation of that, is just another title for Jesus, another title for our good shepherd. The Lord is our shepherd. The Lord is our healer. The Lord is our provider. The Lord is our shepherd. But what I want to point out, the way I want you to think about that, and the book challenges us to think about, is to remember that David was writing this psalm both as a shepherd, and then he was also writing it from the perspective of the sheep. And so David was acknowledging that I'm a sheep too. And he's actually, in this phrase, boasting on who is his shepherd. So it's not the fact that the Lord is my shepherd, it's the Lord is my shepherd. And you all, not the world, not anybody else, but the Lord. So think about that we are all subject to management by a master. And who is your master? Well, the Lord. The Lord is my shepherd. And then we talked about I shall not want. Again, the surface interpretation is I'll have everything I need. And we know that God provides for all of our needs. There's multiple scriptures that reinforce that God is always taking care of us and providing for our needs. But in this interpretation too, I want you to think about it a little bit differently and think of it more in terms of I shall not lack for the expert care of my shepherd. And also, I shall not want in terms of I shall not want worldly things. God is going to satisfy all my desires so that I'm not even going to want the other stuff. Yeah, He'll provide for us, but I'm not going to even feel like I'm missing anything. And then we talked about He makes me lie down in green pastures. And that was a really interesting lesson because there's 4 key reasons why, or 4 key needs that a sheep has in order to lay down. And I didn't know this, but I've learned a whole lot about sheep as we've been going through this book. And there are 4 things that the sheep need to be free from in order to feel like they can lay down and rest. They need to be free from fear of predators, fear of not being able to find food. They need to be free from fear. The second one is they need to be free from tension or friction within the flock. So we talked about the butting order. There's the pecking order in chickens, and in sheep, it's the butting order. So there are dominant sheep in the herd that will butt the other ones out of the way and kind of be bullies. And so, they're constantly on their guard looking to see if somebody's going to challenge their position. So they need to be free from friction. They need to be free from pests or aggravations. So flies and ticks and things that just aggravate and fly at them and bite them all the time. They need to be free from that in order to rest. And then free from hunger, of course. They need to have adequate supply of grass to feed on. Okay, well, let's think about that for a second. Fear, tension, pests, and hunger. Well, that sounds an awful lot like 4 things I need to be free from to rest, right? So, again, direct parallel to our lives. And God can help provide that. It's the shepherd's responsibility to help the sheep achieve that freedom. And that's what God is doing for us. He's trying to free us from fear, tension, aggravation, and hunger. And then the 4th lesson was on, He leads me beside quiet waters, which talks about, and we talked a little bit about the importance of water, that our bodies, just like, and sheep bodies, just like humans, are made up 70% of water. You have to have water to live. And we talked a little bit about Jesus as he met with this Samaritan woman and asked for water, and that He was the living water. He could provide water that would make you never thirst again. And so that water is our time, our refreshment from God. And we talked about there are 3 sources of water for sheep. And one of those is just the dew on the grass. Never even realized that either. But sheep can actually, if they go out to graze early in the morning on grass that is heavy with dew, they can actually get enough water from that grass, from the dew on the grass, to satisfy them for a fairly long time. And the dew on the grass basically represents like our daily devotional time. And getting up early in the morning and spending that time with the Lord. Then there's deep wells. Sometimes a shepherd would need to actually go into like a cave almost in order to find water for his sheep, representing the times that God helps us through those deep, dark times in our lives. And then springs and streams. Well, that's a kind of an anomaly, because we also know that sheep are afraid of moving water. But the difference is that it's fresh water. And what the shepherd would do is he would arrange rocks or other barriers to create a little pool out of that moving water to create a still water, quiet waters for the sheep to drink from. And again, it's God setting up our time with Him so that we can be refreshed from His still waters, from fresh, clean water of His Word. So that brings us to today. And I'm not sure if I hit the 4-minute mark or not, so don't judge me. But today we're talking about He restores my soul. So before reading the chapter, I was thinking, well, what in the world? Why is that phrase in Psalm 23? What does it have to do with, from both the human perspective and the sheep perspective? Why would someone who is in the care of the Good Shepherd need to be restored? And on the other side, from the perspective of David writing as the sheep, what in the world does that have to do with sheep? Well, you're going to find out. It's got an amazing parallel. This is actually my favorite lesson so far on how it parallels to sheep and how we can compare that to our lives. So, and from David's perspective, yeah, he's under the care of the Good Shepherd, and he was the one that was loved of God, but he really experienced a lot of unrest in his own life. He knew what it was to be cast down. He knew what it was to be dejected. He had experienced hardship and defeat. He was chased by Saul for many years. And he suffered defeat in battle. He gave in to temptation with Bathsheba. And so, he knew what helplessness and weakness was like. And he knew that he needed to be restored. Psalm 42:11, he says, "Why, my soul, are you downcast? Why so disturbed within me?" It was agonizing him. He was downcast many, many times. So, from his perspective as a human, as a shepherd, as a child of God, he was in that place where he needed to be restored. But what about the sheep part? All right, so this is where it gets really interesting. Only a shepherd would know what it means for a sheep to be cast down or cast. Now, I want to share with you a picture of those of you that are on our class Facebook page. I found this picture, I turned it into a verse image, and I posted it on our class page. And you can see this sheep here. He's not dead. He's laying on his back with his feet flailing in the air. This is what you call a cast sheep. This sheep has rolled over on its back. And the definition is that it's a sheep that is laid down and can't get up because its center of gravity is off. Okay? Now, that's what we're talking about when we're talking about a cast sheep. In fact, I thought just for grins, I would stick it up here on the board so we can remember what we're talking about. I'm not sure how well you'll see that, but that's what we're talking about, is this poor little sheep who is laying on its back. And when this happens, gases can start to build up in the abdomen, and this sheep is at risk. This sheep can die in a matter of hours if it is not set on its feet. The sheep will lay there, it'll thrash around. I mean, you can just only imagine. If you, there have been times where I haven't been able to get up off the floor, right? And I'm getting to that age. And so, you know, if you consider yourself being helpless and you can't get up, you can't you're just moving around doing everything you can to get back on your feet. And it becomes pathetic and frightened. And so this is just one more reason why the shepherd needs to keep an eye on his sheep. He's constantly watching, constantly counting his sheep to make sure they're all on their feet, because he's not the only one watching. What else is watching? The vultures, the buzzards, the coyotes, the dogs, the cougars. This sheep is easy prey. And if it's not corrected, then that sheep is not going to survive. And so the shepherd knows that a cast sheep is helpless, vulnerable to attack, and close to death. And even a healthy sheep can become cast. It doesn't just have to be a sickly sheep. These are strong, actually healthy sheep. I wanted to read you this excerpt because him being a shepherd, he describes it much better than I can paraphrase. The way it happens is this. A heavy, fat, or long-fleeced sheep will lie down comfortably in some little hollow or depression in the ground. It may roll on its side slightly to stretch out or relax. Suddenly, the center of gravity in the body shifts so that it turns on its back far enough that the feet no longer touch the ground. It may feel a sense of panic and start to paw frantically. Frequently, this only makes things worse. It rolls over even further, and now it is quite impossible for it to regain its feet. As it lies there struggling, gases begin to build up in the rumen. As these expand, they tend to retard or cut off blood circulation to the extremities, especially the legs. If the weather is very hot and sunny, a cast sheep can die in a few hours. If it is cool and cloudy and rainy, it may survive in this position for several days. I don't want to be in that position. So from the shepherd's perspective, this is a constant concern. It's a constant source of anxiety and a reason why he's just got to be on alert. If he sees vultures circling around near his flock, that shepherd is going to go running and go out, count the sheep, and try to find, make sure that they're all on their feet. I asked my daughter, usually I have the class, I'll share, hand out the verses for the day, and well, with an empty classroom, it's kind of hard to do that. So I asked Elizabeth to come with me and help me read some of these scriptures. So Liz, I want you to read Matthew 18, 12, and 13.
What do you think? If a man owns 100 sheep and one of them wanders away, will he not leave the 99 on the hills and go to look for the one that wandered off? And if he finds it, truly I tell you, he is happier about that one sheep than he is about the 99 that did not wander off.
So a cast sheep is one reason why the shepherd would leave the 99. He knows he's going to lose that sheep. And every sheep is valuable to him. Every sheep is part of his livelihood. But yet he also has a connection and a sense of responsibility for caring for those sheep. So just like in the parable, this is what really happens when when a shepherd is caring for their sheep. And so, this would be one scenario. And then once he sees the cast sheep, he'll run to it, with mixture of feelings of joy and fear. Joy that he found the sheep, but fear that maybe he's too late to save. And so the shepherd, when he reaches the sheep, and then what he will do is he'll gently, tenderly roll that sheep over on its side. He'll straddle it and lift it up to its feet. Now remember, this stupid sheep has been laying there on its back, flailing around. Its circulation has been cut off. What happens? His legs are asleep, for crying out loud. So the shepherd has to stand there and support the sheep, rub the circulation back into its legs, and then try to let it go. It'll probably stumble a little bit until it starts to get reacclimated and reoriented and upright. And then the sheep will run to join the rest of the flock after a little bit. And what's the term for this? It's being restored. The shepherd has restored that sheep and restored it to itself and restored it to the flock. So how often are we cast down? How often do we find ourselves, we get knocked off our feet? We can't get back on our feet. The vultures are circling. And even those of us that think we're healthy spiritually or physically, we can get knocked down. Coronavirus, hello, it's knocking normal, healthy people down. And you just can't, you feel like you're flailing around and you're not the way you need to be. So is God frustrated with that? Does he get fed up with us? Oh, stupid sheep is on its back again. No, he doesn't. He restores our souls. He is quick to run to us, to tenderly pick us up and put us back on our feet. Christ, as our shepherd, has the same compassion and concern as the shepherd does for the one of the 99, the one of the 100 that was missing. And so he sees cast men and women the same way that the shepherd does in the psalm. And he cares about the down and out. He wants to restore them to their feet. And this is where the lesson ties in so nicely to Easter. Think about Peter. Thursday night, Jesus had Passover with his disciples. And he prophesied that one of his disciples would betray him. Peter couldn't believe it, that it was him. But what did he do? He denied him 3 times. And in fact, it says in Luke 22:61, every one of the 4 Gospels recounts the story of Peter's denial. But in Luke, it specifically says that after the rooster crowed, this is Luke 22:61, the Lord turned and looked straight at Peter. Wow. I mean, if you knew you had just betrayed someone and then you make eye contact, that's powerful and it's convicting. And so it says he ran out and he wept bitterly. But Jesus had the opportunity to restore him. The Gospel of John, in the last chapter of John 21, after the resurrection, we have this story of Jesus. He's on the beach, and Peter and a couple of the disciples are out in a boat, and they've struggled, they haven't caught fish. And all of a sudden, there's Jesus calling to them. And long story short, they catch 153 fish and bring them to shore, and Jesus is already preparing fish for them. And he has the opportunity to say to Peter, do you love me? Feed my sheep. So he gently restored Peter after his crushing betrayal and puts him back on his feet. And 3 times he's rubbing those feet, getting the circulation back into his soul. Liz, would you read Psalm 56:13?
For you have delivered me from death and my feet from stumbling, that I may walk before God in the light of life.
So, again, another verse that I think David is relating to this situation. You've restored me from death. Because remember, we're vulnerable to death in this situation. And restored his feet from stumbling. And sometimes when we think we're most sure of ourselves, that's when we're at risk of stumbling. And as we all know in the Proverbs, it's actually Proverbs 16:18, pride goeth before a fall. So sometimes when we feel like we're at our best, that's when we need to be careful. And Corinthians says, take heed lest ye fall. And so we want to, we're winding down here, but the last thing I want to talk about in this lesson is there are actually 3 reasons why sheep are prone to be cast. And the first reason, and again, it parallels to us in our lives. The first reason is we're looking for a soft spot where the sheep is. And I wanted to again read a little excerpt. The sheep that choose the comfortable, soft, rounded hollows in the ground in which to lie down very often become cast. In such a situation, it is so easy to roll over on their backs. In the Christian life, there is a great danger in always looking for the easy place, the cozy corner, the comfortable position, where there is no hardship, no need for endurance, and no demand on self-discipline, right? So, if we get too comfortable with what we've attained, with our status in society, our status in the church even, or with worldly possessions, we're getting soft. We're looking for that soft spot. We want it to be easy. We want to serve God, but, are we willing to serve Him when it's not soft, when it's hard? And so that's when the shepherd may need to move us to a pasture that's not so comfortable. To say, you're looking for too many soft spots. And if you land in a soft spot, you might end up being cast. You might end up being cast down. So it's for our own good that He helps us find that place where we're not quite so soft, but where we know we'll be safe. And then the second reason why sheep are prone to be cast is they simply have too much wool. It says there is an aspect too of a sheep simply having too much wool. Often when the fleece becomes very long and heavily matted with mud, manure, burrs, and other debris, it is much easier for the sheep to become cast, literally weighed down with its own wool. Well, wool depicts our self-life. It's the assertion of our own desires and aspirations. We're clinging not only to accumulation of things, which can weigh us down and holding on to possessions and people, but also, I would also say that we're weighed down by labels. We're weighed down by those burrs, that manure, those ticks, the sticks that get stuck on us. Now, we didn't intentionally put them there, but when people label us as being unwise or foolish or stupid or ugly, whatever those labels are, we're letting them stick to us and weigh us down. So what does a shepherd do in that situation? Well, he shears the sheep, right? So the sheep, it's not always a pleasant experience for the sheep. They don't really enjoy being sheared, and it's hard work for the shepherd too. But when it's over, both the sheep and the shepherd are extremely relieved. From the shepherd's perspective, the sheep is less likely to be cast, right? Been freed from that burden and less likely to roll over and not be able to get up. And the sheep is free from that hot and heavy coat and all the mud, the manure, the burrs, the sticks and ticks that were stuck to it. It says, and similarly, in dealing with our old self-life, there will come a day when the Master must take us in hand and apply the keen, cutting edge of His word to our lives. It may be an unpleasant business for a time. No doubt we'll struggle and kick about it. We may get a few cuts and wounds. But what a relief when it is all over. Oh, the pleasure of being set free from ourselves. What a restoration. And then the third reason, and this is, getting a little uncomfortable here, but the reality is when sheep are simply too fat. Okay, well, hello. I'm not going to touch that one very much, and we're not talking necessarily about physical weight either. But an overweight sheep are not the most healthy or productive. Same with people. But weight makes it harder for the sheep to be agile and nimble, and it's more easy, again, for them to be cast. It's easy for their center of gravity to get off balance. And if a shepherd sees this trend in his sheep, He'll put them on a diet, if you will. He makes their pasture, their diet more rigorous, and he'll not give them as much grain in order to make sure that they are strong and healthy and sturdy and energetic, and not as prone to being cast. And for us, again, it's very similar to the previous two examples. It's the sense of attaining a certain stature in society, career achievements, well-being, self-assurance. That's our extra weight. That's where we just allow ourselves to, we let ourselves go, right? And we've gained too much weight. We're not exercising what God has given us and reaching out to people and recognizing we still have a need to grow and to learn and to share with others. So material success does not equal spiritual health or godliness. So our shepherd may impose on us a diet. Or what's a diet look like from the spiritual perspective? It's discipline. And it may be rough or unpalatable at first, but it's for our own good. Again, Liz, can you read Hebrews 12:10-13?
They disciplined us for a little while as they thought best, but God disciplines us for our good, in order that we may share in his holiness. No discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who have been trained by it. Therefore, strengthen your feeble arms and weak knees. Make level paths for your feet, so that the lame may not be disabled, but rather healed.
That's right. So discipline is unpleasant for a time, but it can strengthen us in the end. So I want to bring it back full circle to Psalm 42:11. I'll take this one, Liz. I started out by reading the first part of Psalm 42:11 at the beginning, where David said, "Why, my soul, are you downcast?" Or in the King James it says, "cast down." I think he picked those words for a reason. He's thinking of this scenario, that we're downcast. Why so disturbed within me? But he finishes that verse by saying, "Put your hope in God, for I will yet praise him, my Savior and my God." Liz, can you take 2 Corinthians 4:8-9?
Yes. We are hard pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but not abandoned, struck down, but not destroyed.
And if you look at the King James version of that, it specifically says, "cast down, but not destroyed." Now, again, God is supporting us. He's there to lift us up and not allow us to be destroyed once we are cast down. 2 Corinthians 7:6 is similar.
But God, who comforts the downcast, comforted us by the coming of Titus.
So God comforts the downcast. It's his job as our good shepherd. It's his responsibility. He is looking for us. He's constantly watching to make sure we're on our feet, and he's there for us. And lastly, Psalm 37:23-24.
The Lord makes firm the steps of the one who delights in him. Though he may stumble, he will not fall, for the Lord upholds him with his hand.
Okay. Though he stumble, he will not fall. And we shall not be utterly cast down. Again, those words representing this situation as it parallels the sheep. So that's the lesson for today. I hope it gives you a whole new way to look at this phrase in the 23rd Psalm. He restores my soul. He, just like the shepherd restores a cast sheep, God is restoring our soul. He's gently lifting us up. He's helping us. So if you feel like right now you're upside down, and everything is upside down right now in this world, nothing is the way it should be, but God is there. He knew this was coming, and he's there to restore us, to set us back on our feet. We're going to get through this, and I pray that this weekend especially, you'll think about this, allow God to restore your soul, and let's enjoy sharing this Easter weekend with our close family, the ones that we can talk to and can embrace, and say, let's celebrate our Savior who is there to restore our souls. I'd like to to close in prayer. Lord, I thank you so much for what you do for us every day. I thank you that you are there and you're willing and ready to restore us when we fall. And God, I just pray that you would be with everyone that's watching this lesson. God, that you would renew their love for you and their appreciation for what you're willing and able to do in our lives. Now bless each one as we go into this Easter weekend and we celebrate your resurrection. Thank you for sending your son, and thank you that he rose from the dead, and we know that we will have life eternal as a result. Bless each one, and we thank you for it in your name.